So we're going to talk about nonviolent communication today, obviously. I am a psychologist. I work over at Counseling Services, and every Tuesday afternoon we put on these cat chats, and they're on a huge range of topics. So the next two upcoming that we have, the next one next Tuesday is called Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, and it's about substance use, so alcohol, drinking drugs, that sort of thing during the holidays, and ways to do it in ways that keep you safe. So we're not going to come here and say don't do it, but how can you do it in a way that is not so harmful for you? And then our last one is about surviving finals. So if you want tips and tricks and strategies for getting through finals week without like losing your hair, literally, that's something that you might want to check out. So they're in here every Tuesday, 4 o'clock during the semester. And if you haven't signed in, if you would remember to sign in before you leave, that would be great. That helps us track like how much attendance we get, what are more popular and less popular in terms of the topics that we present on. Okay, something that I want to make sure you all know. So part of all the process of what I was setting up is that we also use Zoom for all of our cat chats. And that way, if you don't want to or you can't make it to campus, you can still watch them remotely. And then we record all of them. And the purpose of recording them is because then we post them on our University Life Cafe website. And that allows you to go back and you can watch any cat chat we've done since we started these a year ago. So that you all know, none of you are on the video. It's just me, the screen, and the podium. But I am going to ask for participation. And so part of that will mean passing a mic around. As long as you don't say your name, nothing about you is going to show up on the video. But the reason that we have to have you mic'd is so that your responses will like be heard through the video or through Zoom. So I just want to let you know that. Because obviously I would be able to hear you if you just spoke to me, but it doesn't help the people who watch this later if you want to come back and watch it. Okay, so I think it's always nice to start off with a little quote, and I think this one captures kind of the point of what we're talking about in nonviolent communication. So we fight not because we truly disagree, but rather because we fail to understand one another. And this really gets at the core of what nonviolent communication is trying to do, which is to say that if we were able to really understand each other's needs, we would do a much better job of helping meet those needs, and we would have a lot less conflict, okay? And we're going to talk in a lot more detail about kind of how that would play out. Okay, so what I'm going to focus on, and I wish this were a little bigger for you, but today we're going to talk about what nonviolent communication is. We're going to practice using it, so I hope you came ready to talk to each other and to talk to me. If we have time, we're going to talk about the difference between dialogue and debate, because those are not the same thing. And then we're going to talk about how nonviolent communication affects our interactions with people cross-culturally. Okay? So we live in a diverse world, and this will actually give you skills to be a lot more effective when you're interacting with people from different parts of the country, with people who have different values than you do, and different identities, or people kind of from different parts of the world, not just different parts of the country. So I always think it's nice to know a little bit about why we're all here before we get started. So I'll talk a little bit first about why I'm here, and then I want to hear from some or all of you about why you came to this presentation today, okay? So the reason that I'm presenting on nonviolent communication, right, I told you we present on a whole bunch of different topics, and at the beginning of the semester they say, hey, sign up for which ones you want to present on. And so I signed up for nonviolent communication because it's something I know a little bit about, but something that I wanted to learn more about. I've had a little exposure through like friends and through my own schooling, but I didn't know a ton about it. And so I thought like, hey, this will be a really great opportunity for me to learn something. So that being said, I want to just give the caveat, I am not an expert in this like topic by any means. And this is an introduction to nonviolent communication. So this is like emphasis on introduction. It's just to get familiar, what's the idea, what's the concepts, and how can this be useful to me? It's not going to be something that's like deep and in depth and you can walk out of here and be like, all right, I'm now an expert as well. Okay? So I wanted to let you know that. So that being said, I'm curious what brought you all here and why you chose to attend a talk about nonviolent communication instead of a whole bunch of other options you could have had. So why are you here today? And since I just talked about the need for the mic, I'll grab the mic. Which is not working. Of course. Okay. So who wants to share a little bit about what brought you here today? Don't be shy. Okay, I'll just repeat them for now. We'll come back to it later.
I needed to do an outside speech report, but I wanted to learn about something that would be helpful.
Cool. So she said, I had to do an outside speech report, but I also wanted something that could help me in teaching later on. Yeah, what about you?
I had to do it too.
Okay. So same thing, speech report, but I don't know anything about nonviolent communication, so I might as well learn something. And hopefully it'll be interesting. That's my hope. How about others? What brought you here today? I can call on people, or you can rescue each other from having to be called on, or yourself. All right, what about you? What brought you here?
Actually went to last week. Last week's pretty interesting.
Cool. So he went to last week's presentation. It was about assertiveness, and thought, why don't I try another one? Maybe it'll be interesting. So my hope is also that it'll be interesting. So how about you? What brought you here? Okay, so what kinds of things might be talked about on campus, outside lectures, that sort of thing? Sure. And I should say, like, this won't be representative of all outside talks, so just take that with a grain of salt. So when I talked about this being an introduction, another thing to know is that, so we have a certificate at K-State. It's through the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Social Work, and it's a certificate of nonviolent studies. So if this is something that you're like, I am really interested in learning more about this, that might be a place to go, is to check out that certificate, or some of the classes that are taught and like count for that certificate. All right. So I think when we talk about nonviolent communication, right, that inherently implies then that there is violent communication that happens. So before I start yakking at you about what this is, let's talk a little bit about what your impressions are of what communicating violently is, and then we'll talk a little bit about, well, what could possibly nonviolent communication mean or look like. Okay, so what are your ideas? We talk about communicating violently. What might that look like, or what does that look like? Yeah. So yelling at people. Okay, so it might be how we talk, so yelling in a loud voice, what we say, name calling. What are other forms of violent communication? Yeah.
It could get physical.
Okay, certainly when the verbal communication turns into physical communication, we see that physical violence come out. What else might be violent in the way we communicate? Yeah, in the back. Okay, so ignoring people sort of leads to the sense of what you have to say isn't important, or being passive-aggressive, which tends to have a manipulative component to it. Getting people to do things you want them to do because they feel guilty, not so much because they chose to or want to. That is definitely violent. Yeah. For sure, when it comes into that category of abuse, so we're violating other people's rights. Emotional abuse, it might be a right to be respected or feel safe or secure, all the way to the physical violence of like your body is actually being harmed by someone. Yeah, I think that's a great description. So it can be things as benign as not paying attention to someone, which doesn't seem like outright violence, but I think there is a violent component, and the founder of nonviolent communication would definitely say, yeah, that's violent communication. All the way to the, like hitting someone, punching someone, that sort of thing. So for sure. So if all of that encompasses violent communication, what does nonviolent communication look like then? Sure. Sure, patience, understanding, hearing out what they have to say, so not interrupting people. What else might fall into nonviolent communication? Sure. Great. So taking this open-minded stance, right? So I'm going to hear what you have to say and not just let my preconceived notions lead me to ignore or block out aspects of what you're saying, or kind of shut me down or shut down the conversation. Is that a fair kind of restatement and expansion? Okay. Yeah. What else? Any other ideas of what nonviolent communication looks like? Okay. So you have covered a lot of sort of the foundation of nonviolent communication. Easily defined violent communication, it doesn't just encompass like actually being hurtful to someone's body, but also emotionally. And then starting to talk about, okay, nonviolent communication, what could this mean? So nonviolent communication is actually a thing. It's not just this idea. It's actually a thing. And so this guy, Marshall Rosenberg, was, and I say was because he just died in February, was sort of the person who kind of pushed nonviolent communication into a larger movement, I guess. So he was the founder and the director of educational services for the Center for Nonviolent Communication. So there actually is an agency or a center. You can check out their website at cnvc.org. And he was really active in traveling all over the country and all over the world talking about what nonviolent communication is. And his assertion was that if everybody communicated nonviolently with one another, we wouldn't have wars anymore, we wouldn't have genocide anymore, all of the conflict that exists in the world would go away because the principles of nonviolent communication when they're at work result in like peace and a desire to help each other out. Okay. And he used this in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia, with countries that were at war with each other, with tribes and cultures that were at war with each other. And he also used it individually, right, with couples who weren't getting along anymore, or parents and kids who couldn't get on the same page and had really problematic relationships. And his assertion is that within 20 minutes of identifying the needs that are going on for the people in the conflict, we can resolve the conflict, right? It might take a long time to get to what the needs are, but in 20 minutes we can resolve this, okay? So what he says is nonviolent communication helps you do something you already know how to do. It makes natural giving possible. So that's the good news. You came to a talk to learn about something you actually already know how to do. So this is not a new skill that you're going to have to learn, but it's probably something you're going to have to practice because our culture has really taught us not to use nonviolent communication. It's really taught us to speak to each other in ways that are violent, or at least violent as defined by Rosenberg. Okay? So we have to kind of go back and unlearn some of the habits that have developed over time. Oops. And so the way that he explains this is talking about jackal language and giraffe language. So jackal language is the violent communication. right? So in jackal language, we do the things that you talk about. Name calling, yelling at one another, passive-aggressive behavior, ignoring each other. So inherent to jackal language is that we blame each other, we judge, we assume other people's intentions, we make assertions about what's right and wrong or what's good and bad, right? How many times has someone had their parent when they were leaving the house, probably more when you were a kid than now as an adult, where your parent might say something like, okay, like be a good girl when you're at your friend's house, be a good boy, you know, or if you're a good kid while we're at the store, I'll give you a piece of candy when we get home or something like that, right? Oh, goodness. We ran into a problem. Okay. Right, so we just sort of, without even thinking about it, talk in jackal language. Giraffe, on the other hand, does the nonviolent stuff. I don't know what this is going to mean for the rest of the presentation. It states facts. It describes observable behaviors. And it's non-judgmental, okay? So for example, if you want your roommate to help you clean the house and your roommate doesn't do it, it'd be really easy to say something like, I can tell you just don't give a shit, right? Like you don't care about me and you don't care about the house because you don't help clean. Totally jackal language. In giraffe language, on the other hand, you might say something like, okay, so I asked you to clean the house and you said no. Or I asked you to help me clean the house and you kept sitting on the couch. There's the observable behavior. I said, will you help me? And you did, sat on the couch, said no, whatever. Okay, so that's the difference, or one of the differences. So we're going to watch for just a second here. Marshall Rosenberg talk a little bit about jackal language, or jackal speak.
And educated in a way we can even be violent to our children. So what is jackal language like? See, jackal language, as I've mentioned, is a language of moralistic judgments. You think in terms of who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. And when you mention change, yes, we want change at times. So how do you get change in the jackal system? Watch a parent try to bring about change in the child. This is a parent teaching a young child say one of the most important words in jackal. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry. You're not really sorry. I can see it. You're not really sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I forgive you. Can you imagine a game like that? Can you imagine a parent responding to a child that way? And if a parent is going to do that to a child in their own family, what are they going to do to people from other cultures who behave in a way they don't appreciate? So, of course, you're going to have violence wherever you have this kind of thinking. In cultures that do not have this thinking, you don't see violence, you see.
Okay, and then we're going to watch one more example. And so what Marshall Rosenberg has asked the audience at this seminar to do is to identify a time where someone has done something that makes what he terms life less wonderful for you. Okay? So think of a time and help identify what happened, and we're going to practice, so he's going to practice with this participant, figuring out how to say what happened in a giraffe speak, right, in observable language. Was that loud enough for everybody? Okay.
So let's see if whether what you wrote down answered the question I asked. Is it an observable behavior, or did you mix in any evaluation? And my two friends here will help us to make this evaluation. This animal has been taught to, somewhat like a police dog, to sniff out narcotics. If there's any jackal mixed in, he will howl. If you answered the question, this animal will dance. So, sir, what did you write down?
My dad blames my wife
Oh!
for my choices.
He does what?
My dad blames my wife for my choices.
Yes, blames is a judgment. See, that's already putting evaluation into it. Dad, do you see yourself as blaming her? No, I see myself as calling attention to the facts. So see, Dad doesn't see that as blaming. No, I'm educating. Thank you, Dad. Yes, okay. So how do we say it? See, we need a direct quote. We need to give to make it an observable behavior, we need to say, my father says, what?
All of his problems.
You are responsible for all of his problems.
Wait a minute.
He says this to the wife. You are responsible for all of his problems.
That's it.
Yes, okay, that's a direct quote. That's what he says. That's giraffe language. You made a direct quote. Okay? See, as soon as you have the word blame in your consciousness, it's going to change the whole energy with which you approach the person, because you're basically making a judgment of them as blaming, which everybody knows is wrong. You see.
All right. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is totally gone. All right. Well, we're going to just roll with it. Okay. So, does it make sense why he said, like, to say my husband or my dad blames my wife for the problem, why the word blame was problematic in there? Because it sort of implies the sense of judgment that dad's doing something wrong, right? We all know we shouldn't blame people. So we want direct quotes, observable behaviors. This is what happened, not this is what I think your reason for doing that was, or this is what you do this because you are such and such kind of person. Okay? So one of the things that we want to talk about is this idea of language. And so the first thing to keep in mind is that we have choice in what language we use, and it's also really important that we keep the idea of choice in the language that we're using, right? So a lot of times we speak in ways that sort of imply that we don't have choice. So you've probably said something like, well, I cleaned my room because my mom made me do it. And that implies you had no choice. When the reality is, like, you had a choice, you just decided it was worth it to clean your room than to get in trouble for not cleaning your room, right? Because mom probably can cause you to have a relatively miserable weekend if you don't clean your room. So it's worth it to do what she asks. And it can sometimes feel like you don't have a choice, but the reality is, like, you had a choice, you just chose to do what she wanted instead of doing what she didn't. So a lot of times, so it's really important for us to kind of erase this idea of, like, someone made me do something from our language. Because Rosenberg would say, using that, implying someone made you do something, is also a violent form of communication. The other way we want to keep that in there is also, it's really easy for us to say, someone made me feel some way, right? Someone did something and that made me angry, that made me sad, which also implies that they have control and you don't about how you're feeling. When the reality is emotions are just a natural reaction to an experience, right? So they may have done something really crappy and that might have infuriated you, but they didn't make you feel angry. You just felt angry as a result of their crappy behavior. The other way this comes up is when we're trying to help people. Like, how many people have heard something really difficult from a friend or a sibling or a parent, and you really want to make the person feel better? I know that's happened for me. Anybody else? Okay. Because we care about these people in our life, and we don't want to see them suffering. That's really difficult. The trouble is that we can't actually fix things for other people, and we can't make them feel better. So using that language, like, how can I make this better for you, or I just want to make it better, still, even though you have really great intentions, is still problematic, right? So I wanted to get that on our radar, that that's something that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the components of nonviolent communication. So we have observation is the first piece. The second piece is the feeling. So observation is actually what you saw, right? What's actually happening. The feeling is how you feel when you observe that action. The third thing is the need. So the need you have that's associated with that feeling. And And then the fourth thing, if I write it here, does that get too low for anybody? It's okay? All right. Is your request. Okay? And your request has to be specific, and it's got to be concrete actions. So don't tell me, don't give me something that I can't do. Okay? Because the problem with telling somebody, I don't want you to walk in here and throw your bag on the floor. It doesn't tell the person what they actually are supposed to do with their bag when they come home, right? So we want to tell people what we need from them, what we'd like them to do, because that way they have a much better shot of actually making sure that it happens. Okay, so I'm going to pass out. I made little cheat sheets for all of us, and now I'm really grateful that I did since PowerPoint's not working. You pass one back. There's 3 for you. And 3 for you. Okay. So this is basically our formula. Oh, did you not get one? What? Okay. Okay, so this is our formula for how we're going to enact observing, expressing our feeling, expressing the need, and making the request. So when I see such and such, I feel this X, Y, and Z emotion because what I need is such and such. And so I would like you to do this thing. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example, and I want you to jot down what's the observed behavior, what's the feeling that's expressed, what's the need that's expressed, and then what request is made. Okay? So when I see you texting while we're driving, I feel frightened and worried about our safety. And I'd like you to wait to text until we get to our destination. Okay, so I'll read it again so you can think about what are the 4 things. So when I see you texting while we're driving, I feel frightened and worried about our safety. I'd like you to wait to text until we get to our destination. So, what's the observed behavior that's expressed here? Yeah. Yep. So I see you texting while we're driving. There's no judgment around that. We're not saying it's right or wrong. We're just saying you're driving and you're texting. Okay? What's the feeling that gets expressed? Yeah, I'm frightened and worried. I'm scared when I see you texting and driving. What's the need? Yeah.
It's not spoken, but you want to feel safe.
Yeah, there's a need for safety here. Definitely. So the need is I need to feel safe when I'm in the car or walking by the person who's driving and texting. And so what's the request that's made? Yeah. Can you wait until we get to wherever we're going to text your friend back or your mom back or whatever? Okay, so let's do another one. When I see you leaving dirty dishes on the counter, I feel frustrated because I need you to help with the household tasks. I'd like you to put your dishes in the dishwasher after you use them. So what is the observed behavior here? Yeah. So what's the actual behavior that gets seen? Yeah. So what's the behavior that the person sees? Yeah, so I see you not doing your dishes, I see you putting your dirty dishes on the counter, or I just see the heap of dirty dishes on the counter. All of those are what gets seen, right? Thanks. What about the feeling? Yeah. Feel frustrated, maybe neglected, disrespected. What's the need? One's trickier. If you don't remember it from the quote, what do you think a reasonable need in this situation would be? I need help. Yeah. I can't do all the household chores myself. I don't have time. I need your help. Okay? And so what's the request? Yeah. Can you put them in the dishwasher? Sure. Okay. So let's, in this next example, we're going to help out two roommates. So we have Taylor and Taylor's roommate. So Taylor's trying to go to sleep, but Taylor's roommate is up talking on the phone with their romantic partner. Okay? So let's help Taylor go through these steps. But first, what do you think, without nonviolent communication, somebody might say to their roommate when they're talking on the phone? Yeah. You might say, hey, can you go out in the hall? I'm trying to go to sleep. That's a pretty nice way to say it. If you've been trying to go to sleep for an hour and your roommate keeps talking and won't get off the phone, can you think of another way someone might say that? That doesn't fall into this nonviolent communication? Shut up. I was thinking like, what the hell, get out of here, I'm trying to sleep. Right? Those are probably like really easy ways to communicate in the moment using Jackal from an emotional standpoint. So we don't want Taylor to do that. So what could Taylor say in terms of the observation? What do you think? What observation would we have Taylor make, since you did so well with the observation last time? Yep, so Taylor's trying to go to sleep, and her roommate or his roommate is talking on the phone. Yep. Okay, I noticed that you're being loud right now. Loud kind of has a judgment, because she could say, I'm not being loud. The roommate could say, I'm not being loud. I'm just talking in my normal voice. Okay, from my perspective, it feels like you're talking really loud. What's an observation? So let's take it a step farther. An observation that nobody would be able to argue with. You're on the phone. So the observation, you're on the phone. And maybe you're on the phone and I'm trying to go to sleep. Okay? So what's the feeling? Taylor's trying to go to sleep. Roommate's on the phone. What's Taylor probably feeling? Frustrated. What else might she be feeling, or he? Annoyed. Tired. Sure. And what's the need? Get some rest? Sure. What was the other thing? A need for silence. Maybe a need for respect? So what request could Taylor make? Yeah. Can you go talk somewhere else? Oops. Right? So instead of shut up, although she might want to say, or he might want to say, shut up, I'm trying to go to sleep, you're on the phone, this is really frustrating and I'm really tired. I really need to feel respected right now and I don't. Could you go talk somewhere else? Yeah. Okay. So the whole idea from the nonviolent communication perspective is if we can express, and this is the most important part, if we can express our needs, we're going to be a heck of a lot more likely to get them met. Okay? So when people know what we actually need, what emotions we're experiencing and what we need, they're a heck of a lot more likely to want to meet those needs. And we want people, the whole idea is we want people to try to meet our needs because they want to, not because they feel like they're going to be punished for not doing it, or because they feel like they're going to get some sort of reward if they do it, okay? So this is not about like, sure, I'll talk, elsewhere so you don't get mad at me. It's like, I'll go talk elsewhere because I want you to get enough sleep. I know you have a test tomorrow, okay? And you can use this same process for saying no. A lot of people have a really difficult time saying no to other people, right? Somebody says like, hey, I just broke up with my partner, I'm really lonely, and I really want to hang out with somebody, I don't want to be alone tonight, can you come over? And you're like, well, crap, I have to study for a test, right? You can go through the same procedure. Like, I know you're feeling really lonely, I hear that, I really want to be there for you, and I feel torn because I have a test tomorrow that I need to study for, and I need to feel prepared for. Is there something we can do that gets your need met and my need met? Maybe we can study together, maybe you can call another friend. So you can still use this for saying no. Nonviolent communication doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, and it doesn't mean you don't say no to people. It just means you say no in a way that is compassionate for what they're needing and expresses your needs. Another thing that's important to pay attention to, and maybe you're already thinking about this, is like, yeah, that's all well and good, and I can do that, but that doesn't mean the people I'm communicating with are going to do that. Maybe Taylor says all of this to Taylor's roommate. Taylor's roommate is like, screw you, I don't care. Last night you were up on the phone when I was trying to go to sleep. And that can make it really challenging, because then it's like, well, crap, I tried to be effective and you just escalated things. Now what are we going to do? And so in this circumstance, it brings in this idea of nonviolent listening, right? So when the roommate responds in that way, that person is still expressing a feeling, a need, and making a request. And obviously they're stating the observation of what happened the night before, but they're doing it in a way that makes it really hard for Taylor to want to be compassionate. So what Taylor can do is figure out a way to listen and hear these things in a nonviolent way. So listen for the observation, listen for the feeling, listen for the need, and listen for the request. And that allows Taylor to have a lot more empathy and be a lot more likely to want to meet that person's needs. Okay? So an example of how that might happen, or what might get done with that, like we'll go back to the texting thing. So say the roles get reversed. So now I'm the person texting, and my passenger says to me, like, dude, what the hell, you're going to get us killed. Right? I'm going to feel pretty defensive and reactive and be like, it's fine, I do it all the time. Instead of that, it's fine, I do it all the time, which is super invalidating and not going to be helpful. I could maybe respond with, okay, so when you see me texting while I'm driving, you feel frightened because you need us to be safe. So do you want me to wait until we just get to where we're going? Is that right? So you can go through observation, feeling, need, request, and guess for that person, and then check in. Is that accurate? Because what it does is it helps them figure out, what do I really need in this situation? They start focusing on their needs, and are a lot more likely, if you're wrong, to be able to clarify, and to clarify in a way that it's like, okay, like that's totally doable. So if we go back to the Taylor example, so she says, I'm on the phone, or you're on the phone, I'm feeling frustrated, I need to be respected and be able to get some sleep, could you go elsewhere? And the roommate's like, screw you, you were talking on the phone while I was trying to sleep last night. What could Taylor say to the person that follows this formula for listening? So what's the observation Taylor could say? So when you see me, or when I was, what? What do you think? What does Taylor guess this person is observing when the roommate says, screw you? You did the same thing to me last night. What's that? Could be talking on the phone. I wonder if maybe the roommate is observing, I don't know, a double standard? Like hypocrisy? You're asking me to do something different than what you did last night? So when I see you asking me to do something that you did just last night, I'm just going to write double standard because it's easier. So when you see me asking you to do something different from what I did last night, what do you all feel when it seems like somebody's being hypocritical or expecting something different of you than they hold themselves to? Angry? You feel angry. Which is also probably pretty evident in the screw you, right? Pretty easy to assume the roommate's angry. And you need what? Respect? Sure. So you also need respect. Maybe consistency from me, respect from me. So what request could Taylor reasonably guess is being asked of her when the roommate says, screw you, you did the same thing last night? What is the roommate actually saying? Yeah, sort of that golden rule, and you want me to do the same thing I'm asking you. You want me to treat you the same way I'm asking you to treat me. Yeah. So we'll just put golden rule. You want equal expectations for the two of us. And that probably is going to de-escalate the roommate quite a bit. Yeah, exactly. And then Taylor can say, okay, yeah, makes sense to me. Next time that somebody calls at night, I'll leave the room and talk to that person, or leave the apartment and talk to that person. Okay. So I'm going to wrap us up there and not talk about the dialogue and debate stuff. But I want to know what questions you have for me about this nonviolent communication, listening, communicating, the formula that I gave you, or any of the examples we talked about. No questions? Great. Well, thanks for coming today. I appreciate your participation. I'm super bummed that the PowerPoint didn't work, but it is what it is. Sometimes that's what happens. So. All right. Well, take care. And, like I said, there's whole courses on this stuff if you want to learn more about it through the Department of, Sociology, Anthropology, and Social Work. So, all right. Take care.